Right across America feel wealthier, spend more and create new jobs. So far, a virtuous circle. The editor of Forbes magazine monitors the world's richest people, a catalogue of wealth ever more dominated by Americans.
Unemployment is at record lows. People have got jobs. It's hard to find workers now. So the prosperity is a general prosperity from the very top to what used to be the very bottom, but which is coming up now.
The twin engines driving America's boom are the internet and rocketing share prices. The digital revolution is firmly based on engineering achievements which are bringing down the costs of industry. The explosion in share prices are built on the wild exuberance of investors, a foundation that will hold only as long as their optimism lasts. Peter Morgan, BBC News on Wall Street.
Now, if you want your baby to be a boy, you should conceive when the weather is hot, according to research by German scientists. It's based on studies of 50 years of birth records.
Oh, big yawn. Come on, young man.
You might have thought that the sex of your baby was purely down to chance, but now it seems the weather plays a part. German research suggests that 9 months after a heat wave, there's a boom in baby boys. But fertility experts here are sceptical.
If you heat the egg of a crocodile and some turtles, you can actually change the sex of the animal that's produced. But that doesn't appear to occur in birds or mammals. I think it's very unlikely to occur in humans.
Can you please go and take out the ampule of sperm from the...
One theory is that hot spells may damage sperm carrying a female X chromosome. So does that mean that couples wanting a boy should try to conceive while on holiday to a hot climate?
Not at all, no. I think that might be a very enjoyable holiday, rather expensive, but I think you could well come back disappointed you had a child of the wrong gender.
Even without heat waves, nature already has a bias in favour of baby boys. For every 100 girls delivered, 105 boys are born. But it's not all good news for men, as women live much longer. Fergus Walsh, BBC News, at the London Fertility Centre.
You're watching BBC News.
Hello there. Well, Thursday saw high pressure sitting to the west, waiting at bay, but we had all those pesky low clouds and even drizzle. A bit of a yucky sort of day for us was Thursday. But we say goodbye to this chap, finally taking all of his low cloud with him. Friday, a much better day. High pressure moves onto the scene, but notice as well another weather front skirting its way into the northwest, giving us thicker cloud in northwest areas, even the odd spot of rain. So, but going out and about through the early morning hours, losing the cloud across the southeast, and just fairly nice, but thickening cloud coming into the northwest areas, even as well where you see the speckly bits of blue, might see some drizzle, the odd spot of rain. Temperatures by morning, fairly pleasant, open those windows up, but nice for the temperatures, 8s and 9s, perhaps only 12 across East Anglia, with the clouds hanging in there a little bit, and as well in the northwest down to bottoming out 11 or so. Here's how we go, going off to work or so. Sunshine being the story for a change, from the south coast through the Midlands up to Newcastle and even as well up to Aberdeen. But notice, up into the northwest, the thicker cloud and the spots of rain coming in with our weather system. And into the afternoon, yes, still going to be there, but not a complete washout. Just bits and pieces of rain popping in with our weather front. But look at that, fair bit of sunshine for the rest of the countryside, Midlands down to the south as well. And with the sunshine, fairly pleasant temperatures, seeing 22s, 23s, even the east parts of Scotland. Aberdeenshire seeing a 20, perhaps a nice day in Aberdeen over towards Kinloss, with most of those rains keeping the numbers down slightly in some of the northwest areas. So probably wondering about the cricket, no problems for today. Might be a day for the sunglasses if you're sitting in the stands, much nicer than the day on Thursday. Today, 23, sun, some cloud. For Saturday, if you're going, even better. 25 with some sun, some cloud. Saturday's a good looking day for all of us. High pressure building across the southern section of the British Isles. What does that mean for us? Sunshine, bit of rain though, perhaps for the northwest. That's the weather for now.
You're watching BBC News 24 with me, Peter Coey. The headlines at 1:30. After a 2-hour meeting with the Prime Minister, Gerry Adams says the Northern Ireland peace process is in real trouble. A crackdown on overpricing and cowboy traders, the government promises a better deal for consumers. The only police officer to be disciplined following the Stephen Lawrence murder inquiry has received the minimum punishment. And the Tories hold their seat in the Eddisbury by-election. Sinn Féin's President Gerry Adams came out of a longer than expected meeting with Tony Blair in Downing Street to say that without implementation, the Good Friday Agreement wasn't worth the paper it was written on. It added to the atmosphere of crisis generated by the IRA statement, which said those who demanded they disarm were working to a failed agenda.
Gerry Adams and his Sinn Féin colleagues left Downing Street tonight saying the peace process was in deep trouble.
The expectation that was raised in the Good Friday Agreement and which was manifest in the referendums north and south in my country, that expectation has been undermined by those who don't want change.
Last night, the IRA said the Good Friday Agreement had failed to deliver tangible progress. It scorned the idea it might be ready to give up its weapons, saying those who demand the decommissioning of IRA weapons lend themselves in the current context, inadvertently or otherwise, to the failed agenda which seeks the defeat of the IRA. David Trimble, who also met Tony Blair today, questioned the Republican movement's willingness to make peace.
I do not see why they bother to use this sort of offensive language and casting these wholly unjustified aspersions on the intentions of other people. But there we are. I mean, we have heard this from Sinn Féin before. What amazes us is that there's still people who are taken in by their lies.
But efforts to heal the rifts are underway. Having forged the Good Friday Agreement, Senator George Mitchell is back to save it. He's already met all the political parties to canvass opinions on the best way ahead.
I wouldn't use the words, where did it all go wrong? I think it's important to emphasize that this, even when resolved, will not be the last obstacle to a durable and sustainable peace.
But today's recriminations between the Unionists and Sinn Féin won't improve the chances of reaching a political settlement.
The government has promised to bring an end to rip-off Britain with measures aimed at reinforcing consumer rights. New laws would mean that rogue traders and shoddy builders could be quickly closed down.
Home improvements can sometimes result in disasters like this, with the builder and the homeowner in dispute. Jim and Diane Tucker despair that the work will never be finished. They say their house has little value as it is.
Well, we've ended up in quite a bad state. We had to borrow money to get a fitted kitchen put in and the bathroom suite. We've ended up with a substandard house and still unfinished. It's now worth £5,000, where it should have been worth £49,000.
Barry Barker paid more than £1,000 for a path which he says only lasted a few months before weeds appeared on the surface and sections broke away.
They left it looking beautiful. The next day it rained and it became like a skating rink. My wife slipped over on it, a dog even slipped over on it. And then later on it began to just fall away.
As ministers got to work with builders ahead of the launch of the White Paper, they spoke of the government's concern to champion consumer rights, while qualified professional builders will be able to display new kite marks guaranteeing the quality of their work. Fraudulent firms could face almost immediate closure.
Far too many people believe that we're living in a rip-off Britain at the present time. Government cannot ignore that. We've got to take action. And I believe that the measures that we're introducing and announcing today will be a very clear demonstration of our commitment to ensure that consumers get a fair deal.
Builders and other tradesmen could also be prosecuted more quickly if their work is found to be substandard. The government is also focusing on the high street. Supermarkets will be obliged to alter their pricing and packaging. Products will be sold in units showing the price per gram, so shoppers can make easy comparisons. Manufacturers won't be allowed to sell food in oversized containers. If they break the law, they could be fined several £1,000s. The government's also planning to draw up a list of price comparisons between the UK and the continent to determine whether British consumers really do pay more for everyday products such as meat, fruit, biscuits and cereals. But while the White Paper has largely been welcomed, consumer groups are also concerned whether ministers will keep their word.
What we're now going to do is make sure the government delivers all its promises. So we'll be watching very closely over the next coming months and years to ensure this White Paper really does deliver the sort of consumer protection we need.
On a lighter note, there's good news for those who take pleasure in the odd pint. Pubs will be forced to serve full measures. A pint of beer will now have to be a pint of liquid, plus the head. Karen Bauman, BBC News.
A man who set up a cooperative to supply cannabis to sick and dying people has been cleared of drugs offences. A jury at Manchester Crown Court acquitted Colin Davis of cultivating and possessing the drug with intent to supply. He claimed he used the drug out of medical necessity and supplied it to 2 sufferers of multiple sclerosis for the same reason. The only police officer to face disciplinary proceedings after the Stephen Lawrence murder inquiry has been given a formal caution. Detective Inspector Ben Bullock was found guilty on 2 counts of neglect of duty. He was cleared of 26 other charges. The caution is the minimum penalty for the offences.
DI Ben Bullock was second in command during the Stephen Lawrence murder inquiry, and last week a tribunal found him guilty on 2 charges of neglect of duty. It said he hadn't done enough to search the homes of the main suspects and hadn't acted when an anonymous letter offered new information about the case. Today his punishment was announced, an official caution, and for the Lawrence family it wasn't good enough.
I feel it's really sad that the most important things that we wanted this man found guilty of was dismissed in the early stages. As far as I'm concerned, with my family, he's guilty on all counts.
He should have been found guilty in relation to all of the charges, in our view, given the evidence that came out of the inquiry. And perhaps more importantly, that there are senior officers who perhaps are more responsible than Mr. Bullock because he was simply their deputy, who have escaped disciplinary proceedings. And that's got to stop.
Ben Bullock will retire from the Metropolitan Police at the end of this week on grounds of ill health. Privately, his supporters say he's been made a scapegoat, and they say he must now be allowed to get on with his life.
He's been through an awful lot. His health has suffered. His family have been through a tremendous amount. He has a teenage son the same age as Stephen. Whilst he can never feel what Neville and Doreen Lawrence feel, he can imagine how he would feel to lose his own son. He has the deepest sympathy for them.
Unless more evidence comes to light, no other members of the police team will face action. The Lawrence family say that makes them more likely to pursue a civil action. John Kay, BBC News.
The United States has criticised China's decision to ban the religious Falun Gong movement. A State Department spokesman has urged Beijing to allow followers of the movement to express their views in accordance with China's international human rights commitments. The authorities in China have accused the sect of undermining stability after it staged demonstrations in 30 cities. The funerals of John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn and her sister Lauren have taken place off the coast of Massachusetts. Members of both families scattered their ashes into the ocean from a US naval ship. Mr. Kennedy's aircraft crashed into the sea off Martha's Vineyard on Friday. Student leaders in Iran have accused the security forces of continuing to make arrests following last week's protests in the capital, Tehran. The protest was sparked by a police raid on a student dormitory. The authorities say that most of the eliminated 1,400 people detained during demonstrations have been freed. A driver who ran into 4 young sisters at a zebra crossing, killing one of them, has been convicted of causing death by dangerous driving. 10-year-old Stephanie Poppett died and her sister Natalie was left blind in one eye following the accident near their home in Wolverhampton in December 1997.
For the past week, the family of the 4 sisters have had to relive the horrors of Christmas 1997. They emerged from court this afternoon, glad the case was over and that they could move on.
My daughter's lost, so, you know, the sentence is nothing to me.
We're just glad that we proved that it was not the kids' fault and they was found guilty. He should have admitted this a long time ago and saved us a lot of grief.
The court was told that Roger Edwards, who'd been driving road sweepers for nearly 30 years, caused the crash by overtaking on a zebra crossing. The 4 sisters were on an early morning trip to a sweet shop near their home in Wolverhampton. Edwards told the court he presumed a car that had stopped to allow the girls to cross had parked up. He overtook it and hit the girls as they crossed, holding hands. 10-year-old Stephanie Poppett died instantly. 2 of her sisters were seriously injured. Edwards had told the court the first he was aware there was a problem was when he saw a child's face on his windscreen. The judge said it was a tragic case. but that Edwards had driven recklessly and had to go to jail.
The trial ends, obviously, but missing Steph, I'll miss her forever.
Edwards, who had been warned to expect a custodial sentence, was this evening taken away to start his 12-month term. Richard Bilton, BBC News, Warwick.
The Conservatives have won the Eddisbury by-election in Cheshire. They held the seat, which was vacated by Sir Alistair Goodlad, who left to become the High Commissioner to Australia. The result was announced a short while ago by the returning officer, Bill Woods.
Declaration of result of poll. I, the undersigned, being the acting returning officer at the election of a member to serve in Parliament for the Eddisbury constituency, held on the 22nd day of July 1999, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Everest Roger Joseph, 98. Grice Dinah, 80. Hanson Margaret Rose, 13,859. Hope Allen, known as Howling Lord, 238. O'Brien Stephen Rothwell, 15,465. Roberts Paul David, 4,757. The number of rejected votes was 32, and I do hereby declare that the said Stephen Rothwell O'Brien is duly elected as Member of Parliament for the said constituency. Thank you.
Well, that was a short time ago, just about 20 minutes ago, in fact, and I'm joined live from Eddisbury now by our correspondent there, Laura Trevelyan. Laura, was that result pretty much as expected?
Well, actually, it was rather closer, perhaps, than we might have expected, because the Conservatives last time held this seat with a majority of nearly 1,200. They've held it now with 1,606 votes, but perhaps that's not quite as good a result as they might have expected. But joining me now is the victorious candidate, Mr. Stephen O'Brien. Stephen, what's your reaction to that result? It's closer than you would have liked, surely.
Oh, it's an excellent result for the Conservatives, following on from the local elections and the European elections. And indeed, it's a doubling of our majority if you take into account the reduced turnout.
But it's not that good, is it? I mean, surely you should be getting about 5,000 votes in a mid-term election if you're going to do well at the general election.
Oh, I think the result of this election is showing that the people of Eddisbury are sending a very strong message to this Labour government. They are feeling let down on hospitals and roads and schools, and they are supporting an agenda of things which we said we were standing for, our country way of life, supporting less red tape for business and for saving the pound.
What was the definitive issue of the campaign? I mean, was it fox hunting? Obviously, Labour's decision to ban fox hunting has played quite big here, but also your Save the Pound campaign. I mean, what, in your view, was the definitive issue?
Well, following William Hague's policy of in Europe but not run by Europe, so endorsed by the British electorate at the Europeans, that remains a very strong issue on the doorsteps. Fox hunting was not a big issue on the doorstep. There are strongly held views both ways, but that was not a definitive issue as you describe it.
So do you hope to improve on this result of the general election?
Oh, I think from here we shall go on from strength to strength. I think that we have shown that we were listening to the people of Eddisbury, that we were speaking up for the things that really mattered to them, that we had good, common sense, sensible policies and principles to offer. And yes, I have every expectation that we shall build on from this very, very pleasing result.
But if this was translated into a general election, the Conservatives would hardly pick up any seats. I mean, it's not a good performance, is it, 2 years into the Labour term?
Oh, I think on the contrary, I think that it would be replicated across the country, which by-elections, of course, would be dangerous to extrapolate too much from a by-election, as always. But I think you would find that this type of campaigning will produce extremely strong results for the Conservatives, and we have every expectation of building upon these themes to take to the whole of the country as soon as Mr. Blair dares call the next general election.
Stephen O'Brien, thanks very much indeed. And that's Stephen O'Brien, the victorious Conservative candidate here at the Eddisbury by-election in Winsford, who's managed to scrape home, you might think, with a result of 1,606. That's the majority.
Well, Laura, thank you. Mr. O'Brien, they're putting a very brave face on what was, as you say, a bit of a narrow squeak. Do you think Labour will take some comfort from the result?
I think Labour are taking a lot of comfort from the result. I mean, what they're saying is that there's barely been any swing away from them to the Conservatives. So they're saying it is a good result. I mean, obviously they hope to win. Don't forget the Prime Minister was down here, so to that extent they failed to motivate their voters to actually defeat the Conservatives. But they feel it is a very good result for their mid-term, and one that if was replicated at the general election, they would obviously be holding on to a lot of those seats that they won back in 1997.
Laura, thanks very much indeed. You're watching News 24, still to come on the programme. Ken and Barbie move out of the doll's